Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more Esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mrs. Helena Blavatsky. This is Isis Unveiled. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It's not the format for everyone, but some people seem to find enjoyment in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box below, along with the original source material so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. A particular note again today is almost certainly going to be the Unconventional Bible Study, 161 videos on why I do not follow Christianity. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration with Isis Unveiled, Part 2, Chapter 12, Part 2. Numerous are the Buddhist and Lamic saints who have been renowned for the unsurpassed sanctity of their lives and their miracles. So, Tisu, the emperor's spiritual teacher, who consecrated Kublai Khan, the Nadir Shah, was known far and wide as much for the extreme holiness of his life as for the many wonders he wrought. But he did not stop at fruitless miracles. He did better than that. Tisu purified completely his religion, and from one single province of southern Mongolia, it is said to have forced Kublai to expel from convents 500,000 monkish impostors, who made a pretext of their profession to live in vice and idleness. Then the Lamas had their great reformer, the Shabaran Tsongkhapa, who is claimed to have been immaculately conceived by his mother, a virgin from Koko Nor, 14th century, who is another wonder worker. The sacred tree of Kunbum, the tree of the 10,000 images, which, in consequence of the degeneration of the true faith, had ceased budding for several centuries, now shot forth new sprouts and bloomed more vigorously than ever from the hair of this avatar of Buddha, says the legend. The same tradition makes him, Tsongkhapa, ascend to heaven in 1419. Contrary to the prevailing ideas, few of these saints are Kublai Khan's or Shabaran's reincarnations. Many of the lamaseries contain schools of magic, but the most celebrated is the collegiate monastery of Shutukt, where there are over 30,000 monks attached to it, the lamasery forming quite a little city. Some of the female nuns possess marvelous psychological powers. We have met some of these women on the way from Lhasa to Kandy, the Rome of Buddhism, with its miraculous shrines and Gautama relics. To avoid encounters with Mussulmans and other sects, they travel by night, alone, unarmed, and without the least fear of wild animals, for these will not touch them, but the Muslims will. At the first glimpses of dawn, they take refuge in cages and viharas prepared for them by their co-religionists at calculated distances. For notwithstanding the fact that Buddhism has taken refuge in Ceylon, and nominally there are but few of the denomination in British India, yet the secret Bayuds, brotherhoods, and Buddhist viharas are numerous, and every Jain feels himself obliged to help, indiscriminately, Buddhist or Lamist. Ever on the lookout for occult phenomena, hungering after sights, one of the most interesting that we have seen was produced by one of these poor traveling bhikshu. It was years ago, and at a time when all such manifestations were new to the writer. We were taken to visit the pilgrims by a Buddhist friend, a mystical gentleman born at Kashmir of Kachchi parents, but a Buddha Lamist by conversion, and who generally resides at Lhasa. "Why carry about this bunch of dead plants?" inquired one of the bhikshuni, an emaciated, tall, and elderly woman, pointing to a large nosegay of beautiful, fresh, and fragrant flowers in the writer's hand. "Dead?" we asked inquiringly. "Why, they have just been gathered in the garden." "And yet they are dead," she gravely answered. "To be born in this world, is this not death? No. See how these herbs look when alive in the world of eternal light, in the gardens of our blessed foe." I hate that sentiment. Right? We are here for the incarnation. We are here to be here. We are here for the experience of being here. And to say that this is a death or a prison is a horrible mindset, and I absolutely detest it. Without moving from the place where she was sitting on the ground, the Ani took a flower from the bunch, laid it in her lap, and began to draw together, by large handfuls as it were, invisible material from the surrounding atmosphere. Presently, a very, very faint nodule of vapor was seen, and this slowly took shape and color, until, poised in midair, appeared a copy of the bloom we had given her. Faithful to the last tint and the last petal it was, and lying on its side like the original, but 1,000-fold more gorgeous in hue and exquisite in beauty, as the glorified human spirit is more beauteous than its physical capsule. Flower after flower, to the minutest herb, was thus reproduced and made to vanish, reappearing at our desire, nay, at our simple thought. Having selected a full-blown rose, we held it at arm's length, and in a few minutes our arm, hand, and the flower, perfect in every detail, appeared reflected in the vacant space, about 2 yards from where we sat. But while the flower seemed immeasurably beautified and as ethereal as the other spirit flowers, the arm and hand appeared like a mere reflection in a looking-glass, even to a large spot on the forearm, left on it by a piece of damp earth which had stuck to one of the roots. Later we learned the reason why. A great truth was uttered some 50 years ago by Dr. Francis Victor Broussais, when he said, "If magnetism were true, medicine would be an absurdity." Magnetism is true. Yes, magnetism is true. And so we shall not contradict the learned Frenchman as to the rest. Magnetism, as we have shown, is the alphabet of magic. It is idle for anyone to attempt to understand either the theory or practice of the latter until the fundamental principle of magnetic attractions and repulsions throughout nature is recognized. Many so-called popular superstitions are but evidences of an instinctive perception of the law. And untutored people are taught by the experience of many generations that certain phenomena occur under fixed conditions. They give these conditions and obtain the expected results. Ignorant of the laws, they explain the fact by supernaturalism, for experience has been their sole teacher. In India, as well as in Russia and some other countries, there is an instinctive repugnance to stepping across a man's shadow, especially if he have red hair. And in the former country, natives are extremely reluctant to shake hands with persons of another race. These are not idle fancies. Every person emits a magnetic exhalation, or aura, and a man may be in perfect physical health, but at the same time his exhalation may have a morbific character for others, sensitive to such subtle influences. Dr. Esdale and other mesmerists long since taught us that the Oriental people, especially Hindus, are more susceptible than the white-skinned races. Baron Rickenbach's experiments, and in fact the world's entire experience, prove that these magnetic exhalations are most intense from the extremities. Therapeutic manipulations show this. Handshaking is, therefore, most calculated to communicate antipathetic magnetic conditions, and the Hindus do wisely in keeping their ancient superstition, derived from Manu, constantly in mind. Now, I want to point this out because some people have an exception, right? There were some not great attitudes in the 1800s. That is a given. We understand that. I want to point out that that is not because they are brown, right? It is not because they are not white-skinned. It is because of their belief system. They believe that it will affect them, so it does. We don't believe that it will affect us, so it won't. That is the difference. It is a cultural difference on acceptance of magical principles and properties. If you believe, it can happen. And so this, especially Hindus, is not because of their race. It is because of their beliefs. It is because of the culture in which they were raised. If they were raised, despite being of the exact same lineage, to believe other beliefs than the Hindu belief, then they would not be as susceptible to these things. In much the same way that Christians are susceptible to being deceived by anyone saying the name of Jesus, it is the same relative principle. So it is not because of red hair. It is not because of brown skin. Anything making the decision based off of the most arbitrary of characteristics is automatically fallacious, right? If you don't know, that means not true, right? So if it's based off of melanin or hair color, it is almost certainly going to be ridiculous. Back to the text. The magnetism of a red-haired man, we have found in almost every nation, is instinctively dreaded. We might quote proverbs from the Russians, Persian, Georgian, Hindustani, French, Turkish, and even German. What about the Irish? What about the Scottish? Do they say the same thing? Did they automatically instinctively dread people because they have red hair? What about the tribes in Africa who have red hair and they have dark skin? Are they automatically imposed to not give credit or credence to red-haired people? Right? This is as much racism as anything else. There's nothing inimically evil about redheads. I make jokes all the time. My son is a ginger, right? My dad is a ginger. The entire family is a ginger. I am not, but I make fun of gingers all the time, but it is in good-spirited, light-hearted fun. It is never malicious or mean, and I don't actually believe that gingers don't have souls or that they eat the souls of others. It is a joke, right? It's a joke, not a dig. Don't take it so hard. This is them taking it too hard. This is Tim lending credence where credence should not be lent, and this is one of the things that I am absolutely determined to show and point out and make sure that you understand completely and fully. Your color of your skin, the color of your hair, has absolutely nothing to do with your character or content. Well, your culture does. The way that you were brought up does, but your color does not. All right, back to the text. To show that treachery and other vices are popularly supposed to accompany the rufous complexion. Tell that to Moses. Moses was red. Tell that to Jesus. Jesus was red. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to go back and read the book. I've got a whole Bible study where we can talk about those things. When a man stands exposed to the sun, the magnetism of that luminary causes his emanations to be more projected towards the shadow, and the increased molecular action develops more electricity. This is trying to explain something that you do not understand. Hence, an individual to whom he is antipathetic, though neither might be sensible of the fact, would act prudently in not passing through the shadow. Careful physicians wash their hands upon leaving each patient. Why then should they not be charged with superstition as well as the Hindus? Because bacteria is a thing, so are viruses. The sporules of disease are invisible, but no less real, as European experience demonstrates. Well, Oriental experience for 100 centuries has shown that germs of moral contagion linger about localities, and impure magnetism can be communicated by the touch. And again, both of those are incorrect. That is not true, right? The moral contagion, it is not something that you catch. It is something that you're taught. Right? If you are taught racism, then you're going to have racism. And it is entirely possible that your entire locality has the exact same problem that you do. It does not mean it is because of the location or because they are breathing out racism. Right? That is fucking stupid. Like, we're here to learn things and to point out the inconsistencies, and this is absolutely an inconsistency. Also, impure magnetism, while it can be communicated by the touch, if you are healthy and you are doing the things, especially the things that I talk about, nobody else's magnetism can affect you in that manner. You cannot curse me. I don't care how powerful you think you are. My God has protected me to the nth degree. It is so much so that I cannot be interfered with by the seventh level deities or the entities. I cannot be messed with by those, much less somebody on the fifth plane. It is not going to happen. You cannot touch me and affect my magnetism in that way. It is not a possibility. I am too intrinsically strong in my magnetics for your magnetics to affect me. So both of those, yeah, no. Another prevalent belief in some parts of Russia, particularly Georgia, Caucasus, and in India, is that in case the body of a drowned person cannot be otherwise found, if a garment of his be thrown in the water, it will float until directly over the spot and then sink. We have seen the experiment successfully tried with the sacred cord of a Brahmin. It floated hither and thither, circling as though in search of something. until suddenly, darting in a straight line of about 50 yards, it sank, and at the exact spot brought up the divers, and in the exact spot the divers brought up the body. I do not discount this, simply because dowsing is real, and dowsing is the search for something by using mechanical means, right? You're using the electromagnetics of water, and you're using something, either a stick or metal rods or whatever it is, to read the magnetics with the intention of finding water. And so it works. It is the same thing with this, where you place your intentionality with the proper directionality, right? You're doing it in the right way and with the right intentions. It's going to work. And so if you are dowsing for water, you're going to find the water. But if you're dowsing for the body, you're going to find the body. That is not to say that I can do it or that I have seen it done, but I do not doubt that it can be because of the mechanics behind it. I have seen similar things done, right? Not necessarily finding a body in the lake, but we have seen similar things done. We find this superstition even in America. A Pittsburgh paper of very recent date describes the finding of the body of a young boy named Reed in the Monongahela by a like method. All other means having failed, it says, a curious superstition was employed. One of the boy's shirts was thrown into the river where he had gone down, and, it is said, floated on the surface for a time, and finally settled to the bottom at a certain place, which proved to be the resting place of the body, and which was then drawn out. The belief that the shirt of a drowned person, when thrown into the water, will follow the body is well spread, absurd as it appears. This phenomena is explained by the law of the powerful attraction existing between the human body and objects that have been long worn upon it. No, that is not correct. It is what I just said. It is your intentionality by putting it in the water that imbues it with the power to find it. Just the same as holding the dowsing rod is you imbuing that tool, or me holding this third eye stone. Me imbuing that stone gives it power. It has no power on its own. None of the tools can do anything by themselves. It has to have intentionality from a director. We are the directors. Like, I get annoyed with people like, oh, this crystal is going to change my life. No, it's not. No, it's not. Your intentionality in using the crystal can, but you just having a crystal is not going to change your life. It is not going to do it. The oldest garment is the most effective for the experiment. A new one is useless. And again, that comes down to belief. From time immemorial, in Russia, in the month of May on Trinity Day, maidens from the city and village have been in the habit of casting upon the river wreaths of green leaves, which each girl has to form for herself, and consulting their oracles. If the wreath sinks, it is a sign that the girl will die unmarried within a short time. If it floats, she will be married. The time depending upon the number of verses she can repeat during the experiment. We positively affirm that we have personal knowledge of several cases, 2 of them from our intimate friends, when the augury of death proved true and the girl died within 12 months. Tried on any other day than the Trinity, the result would doubtless be the same. Yeah, and that is for reasons. The sinking of the wreath is attributable to its being impregnated with the unhealthy magnetism of a system which contains the germs of early death. Such magnetisms having an attraction for the earth at the bottom of the stream. As for the rest, we are willing to abandon it to the friends of coincidence. I am not. I am going to tell you what is going on there. Once again, it comes down to the mind. If you are convinced that you are cursed, you are cursed. If you are convinced that you are blessed, you are blessed. If you are convinced that the worst thing is going to happen, the worst thing is going to happen. So if you're convinced that this ceremony or ritual is going to indicate your immediate demise, guess what's going to happen? You are going to bring that into your life. You will bring into your life the things in which you focus and invest your energy in. Make sure it's the correct thing. The same general remark as to superstition, having a scientific basis, applies to the phenomenon produced by fakirs and jugglers, which skeptics heap into the common category of trickery. And yet, To a close observer, even to the uninitiated, an enormous difference is presented between the kemiya phenomena of a fakir and the bati-bazi jugglery of a trickster, and the necromancy of a jadugar or sahir, so dreaded and despised by the natives. This difference, imperceptible, nay, incomprehensible to the skeptical European, is instinctively appreciated by every Hindu, whether of high or low caste, educated or ignorant. The Tangalan, or witch, who uses her terrible abhichar, mesmeric powers, with intent to injure, may expect death at any moment. For every Hindu finds it lawful to kill her. The law returns. A bukabaz, or juggler, serves to amuse. A serpent charmer, with his ba-ini, full of venomous snakes, is less dreaded, for his powers of fascination extend but to animals and reptiles. He is unable to charm human beings, to perform that which is called by the natives mantar funkana, to throw spells on men by magic. But with the yogi, the sannyasi, the holy men who acquire enormous psychological powers by mental and physical training, the question is totally different. Some of these men are regarded by the Hindus as demigods. Europeans cannot judge of these powers but in rare and exceptional cases. The British resident who has encountered in the maidens in public places what he regards as frightful and loathsome human beings, sitting motionless in the self-inflicted torture of the urdhva bahu, with arms raised above the head for months and even years, need not suppose that they are wonder-working fakirs. The phenomena of the latter are visible only through the friendly protection of a Brahmin, or under peculiarly, I cannot say that word as much as I try, fortuitous circumstances. Such men are as little accessible as the real Nautch girls, of whom every traveler talks, but very few have actually seen, since they belong exclusively to the pagodas. It is surpassingly strange that with the thousands of travelers and the millions of European residents who have been in India and have traversed it in every direction, so little is yet known of that country and the lands which surround it. It may be that some readers will feel inclined not merely to doubt the correctness, but even openly contradict our statement. Doubtless we will be answered that all that is desirable to know about India is already known. In fact, this very reply was once made to us personally. That resident Anglo-Indians should not busy themselves with inquiries is not strange. For, as a British officer remarked to us on one occasion, society does not consider it well bred to care about the Hindus or their affairs, or even show astonishment or desire information upon anything they may see extraordinary in that country. But it really surprises us that at least travelers should not have explored more than they have in this interesting realm. Hardly 50 years ago, in penetrating the jungles of the Blue or Nilgiri hills in southern Hindustan, a strange race, perfectly distinct in appearance and language from any other Hindu people, was discovered by two courageous British officers who were tiger hunting. Many surmises, more or less absurd, were set on foot, and the missionaries, always on the watch to connect every mortal thing with the Bible, even went so far as to suggest that this people was one of the lost tribes of Israel, supporting their ridiculous hypothesis upon their very fair complexions and strongly marked Jewish features. The latter is perfectly erroneous, the Todas, as they are called, not bearing the remotest likeness to the Jewish type, either in feature, form, action, or language. They closely resemble each other, and, as a friend of ours expresses himself, the handsomest of the Todas resembled the statue of the Grecian Zeus in majesty and beauty of form more than anything he had yet seen among men. 50 years have passed since the discovery, but though since that time towns have been built on these hills and the country has been invaded by Europeans, no more has been learned of the Todas than at first. Among the foolish rumors current about this people, the most erroneous are those in relation to their numbers and to their practicing polyandry. The general opinion about them is that, on account of the latter custom, their number has dwindled to a few hundred families, and the race is fast dying out. We had the best means of learning much about them, and therefore state most positively that the Todos neither practice polyandry, nor are they as few in number as we supposed. We are ready to show that no one has ever seen children belonging to them. Those that may have been seen in their company have belonged to the Badagas, a Hindu tribe totally distinct from the Todas in race, color, and language, and which includes the most direct worshippers of this extraordinary people. We say worshippers, for the Badangas clothe, feed, serve, and positively look upon every Toda as a divinity. They are giants in stature, white as Europeans, with tremendously long and generally brown, wavy hair and beard, which no razor ever touched from birth. Handsome as a statue of Phaidas or Praxiteles, the Toda sits the whole day inactive, as some travelers who have had a glance at them affirm. From the many conflicting opinions and statements we have heard from the very residents of Utakamund and other little new places of civilization scattered about the Nilgiri hills, we call the following. They never use water. They are wonderfully handsome and noble looking, but extremely unclean. Unlike other natives, they despise jewelry and never wear anything but a large black drapery or blanket of some woolen stuff, with a colored stripe at the bottom. They never drink anything but pure milk. They have herds of cattle, but neither eat their flesh, nor do they make their beasts of labor plow or work. They neither sell nor buy. The Badagas feed and clothe them. They never use or carry weapons, not even a simple stick. The Todas can't read and won't learn. They are the despair of missionaries and apparently have no sort of religion beyond the worship of themselves as the lords of creation. We will try to correct a few of these opinions as far as we have learned from a very holy personages, a Brahmanam guru who has our great respect. Nobody has ever seen more than 5 or 6 of them at one time. They will not talk with foreigners, nor was any traveler ever inside their peculiar long and flat huts, which apparently are without either windows or chimney and have but one door. Nobody ever saw the funeral of a Toda, nor very old men among them, nor are they taken sick with cholera, while thousands die around them during such periodical epidemics. Finally, though the country all around swarms with tigers and other wild beasts, neither tiger, serpent, nor any other animal so ferocious in those parts was ever known to touch either a Toda or one of their cattle, though, as said above, they never even use a stick. Furthermore, the Todas do not marry at all. They seem few in number, for no one has or ever will have a chance of numbering them. As soon as their solitude was profaned by the avalanche of civilization, which was, perchance, due to their own carelessness, the Todas began moving away to other parts as unknown and more inaccessible than the Nilgiri hills had formerly been. They are not born of Toda mothers nor of Toda parentage. They are the children of a certain very select sect, and are set apart from their infancy for special religious purposes. Recognized by a peculiarity of complexion and certain other signs, such a child is known as what is vulgarly termed a Toda from birth. Every 3rd year, each of them must repair to a certain place for a certain period of time, where each of them must meet. Their dirt is but a mask, such as sannyasi puts on in public in obedience to his vow. Their cattle are, for the most part, devoted to sacred uses, and, though their places of worship have never been trodden by a profane foot, they nevertheless exist, and perhaps rival the most splendid pagodas, gopurams known to Europeans. The Badagas are their special vassals, and, as has been truly remarked, worship them as half-deities, for their birth and mysterious powers entitle them to such a distinction. The reader may rest assured that any statement concerning them that clash with the little that is above given are false. No missionary will ever catch one with his bait, nor any Badaga betray them, though he were cut to pieces. They are a people who fulfill a certain high purpose, and whose secrets are inviolable. Furthermore, the Todas are not the only such mysterious tribe in India. We have named several in a preceding chapter, but how many are there besides these that will remain unnamed, unrecognized, and yet ever present? What is now generally known of shamanism is very little, and that has been perverted like the rest of the non-Christian religions. It is called the heathenism of Mongolia, and wholly without reason, for it is one of the oldest religions of India. It is spirit worship, or belief in the immortality of the souls, that the latter are still the same men they were on earth, though their bodies have lost their objective form, and man has exchanged his physical for a spiritual nature. In its present shape, it is an offshoot of primitive theurgy and a practical blending of the visible with the invisible world. Whenever a denizen of earth desires to enter into communication with his invisible brethren, he has to assimilate himself to their nature. In example, he meets these beings halfway, and, furnished by them with a supply of spiritual essence, endows them, in his turn, with a portion of his physical nature, thus enabling them sometimes to appear in a semi-objective form. It is a temporary exchange of natures called theurgy. Shamans are called sorcerers because they are said to evoke the spirits of the dead for purposes of necromancy. The true shamanism, striking features of which prevailed in India in the days of Megasthenes, 300 BC, can no more be judged by its degenerated scions among the shamans of Siberia than the religion of Gautama Buddha can be interpreted by the fetishism of some of his followers in Siam and Burma. It is in the chief lamasseries of Mongolia and Tibet that it has taken refuge, and there shamanism, if so we must call it, is practiced to the utmost limits of intercourse allowed between man and spirit. The religion of the Lamas has faithfully preserved the primitive science of magic, and produces as great feats now as it did in the days of Kublai Khan and his barons. The ancient mystic formula of the king Srong Tsansgampo, the Om Mani Padme Hum, affects its wonders now as well as in the 7th century. Avalokitesvara, highest of the three Bodhisattvas, and patron saint of Tibet, projects his shadow full in the view of the faithful at the lamasery of the Gagdan, founded by him, and the luminous form of Tsongkhapa under the shape of a fiery cloudlet that separates itself from the dancing beams of the sunlight, holds converse with the great congregation of lamas, numbering thousands, the voice descending from above like the whisper of the breeze through foliage. Anon, says the Tibetans, the beautiful appearance vanishes in the shadows of the sacred trees in the park of the lamasery. At Garma-Kian, the mother cloister, it is rumored that bad and unprogressed spirits are made to appear on certain days and forced to give an account of their evil deeds. They are compelled by the Lamic adepts to redress the wrongs done by them to mortals. This is what Hooke naively terms personating evil spirits, in example, devils. Were the skeptics of various European countries permitted to consult the accounts printed daily at Moru and in the City of Spirits of the business-like intercourse which takes place between the lamas and the invisible world, they would certainly feel more interest in the phenomena described so triumphantly in the spiritualistic journals. At Buddha-ila, or rather Phot-ila, Buddha's Mount, in the most important of the many thousand lamaseries of that country, the scepter of Bodhisattva is seen floating unsupported in the air, and its motions regulate the action of the community. Whenever a lama is called to account in the presence of the superior of the monastery, he knows beforehand it is useless for him to tell an untruth. The regulator of justice, the scepter, is there, and its waving motion, either approbatory or otherwise, decides instantaneously and unerringly the question of his guilt. We do not pretend to have witnessed all this personally. We wish to make no pretensions of any kind. Suffice it, with respect to any of these phenomena, that we have not yet seen with our own eyes has been so substantiated to us that we endorse its genuineness. A number of lamas in Sikkim produce miapo, miracle, by magical powers. The late patriarch of Mongolia, Gegen Chuktu, who resided at Urga, a veritable paradise, was the 16th incarnation of Gautama, but therefore a bodhisattva. He had the reputation of possessing powers that were phenomenal, even among the thaumaturgists of the land of miracles par excellence. Let no one suppose that these powers are developed without cost. The lives of most of these holy men, miscalled idle vagrants, cheating beggars, who were supposed to pass their existence in preying upon the easy credulity of their victims, are miracles in themselves. Miracles because they show what a determined will and perfect purity of life and purpose are able to accomplish, and to what degree of preternatural asceticism a human body can be subjected and yet live to reach a ripe old age. No Christian hermit has ever dreamed of such refinement of monastic discipline, and the aerial habitation of a Simon Stylite would appear child's play before the fakirs and the Buddhist inventions of will tests. But the theoretical study of magic is one thing, the possibility of practicing it quite another. At Bras-Sapons, the Mongolian college, where over 300 magicians, sorciers, as the French missionaries call them, teach about twice as many pupils from 12 to 20. The latter have many years to wait for their final initiation. Not 1 in 100 reaches the highest goal, and out of the many thousand lamas occupying nearly an entire city of detached buildings clustering around it, not more than 2% become wonder workers. One may learn by heart every line of the 108 volumes of Kajor and still make but a poor practical magician. There is but one thing which leads surely to it, and this particular study is hinted at by more than one Hermetic writer. One, the Arabian alchemist Abipili, speaks thus: I admonish thee, whosoever thou find that desireth to dive into the inmost parts of nature, if that thou seekest thou findeth not within thee, thou wilt never find it without thee. If thou knowest not the excellency of thine own house, why dost thou seek after the excellency of other things? O man, know thyself. In thee is hid the treasure of treasures. In another alchemic tract, De Mana Benedicto, the author expresses his ideas of the philosopher's stone in the following terms: My intent is for certain reasons not to prate too much of the matter, which yet is but one only thing, already too plainly described, for it shows and sets down such magical and natural uses of it, the stone, as many have that have had it never knew nor heard of, and such as, when I beheld them, made my knees to tremble and my heart to shake, and I to stand amazed at the sight of them. Every neophyte has experienced more or less such a feeling, but once that is overcome, the man is an adept. Within the cloisters of Dashai, Lumbo, and Siddhazang, these powers, inherent in every man, called out by so few, are cultivated to their utmost perfection. Who, in India, has not heard of the Bandachanrambachuti, or the Hutukotu of the capital of Higher Tibet? His brotherhood of Kilan was famous throughout the land, and one of the most famous brothers was a Peiling, an Englishman, who arrived one day during the early part of this century from the West. A thorough Buddhist, and after a month's preparation was admitted among the Kilans. He spoke every language, including the Tibetan, and knew every art and science, says the tradition. His sanctity and the phenomena produced by him caused him to be proclaimed a chaperon after a residence of but a few years. His memory lives to the present day among the Tibetans, but his real name is a secret with the chaperons alone. The greatest of the Maipo, said to be the object of the ambition of every Buddhist devotee, was, and yet is, the faculty of walking in the air. The famous king of Siam, Piyamatak, the Chinese, was noted for his devotion and learning, but he attained this supernatural gift only after having placed himself under the direct tuition of a priest of Gautama Buddha. Crawford and Finlayson, during their residence at Siam, followed with great interest the endeavors of some Siamese nobles to acquire this faculty. Numerous and varied are the sects in China, Siam, Tartary, Tibet, Kashmir, and British India, which devote their lives to the cultivation of supernatural powers, so called. Discussing one of such sects, the Teosei, Samito says, "They pretend that by means of sudden exercises and meditations one shall regain his youth, and others will attain to be Shinshin, in example, terrestrial beati, in whose state every desire is gratified, whilst they have the power to transport themselves from one place to another, however distant, with speed and facility." This faculty relates but to the projection of the astral entity in a more or less corporealized form, and certainly not to bodily transportation. This phenomena is no more a miracle than one's reflection in a looking glass. No one can detect in such an image a particle of matter, and still there stands our double, faithfully representing even to each single hair on our heads. If, by this simple law of reflection, our double can be seen in a mirror, how much more striking a proof of its existence is afforded in the art of photography. It is no reason, because our physicists have not yet found the means of taking photographs, except at a short distance, that the acquirement should be impossible to those who have found those means in the power of the human will itself, freed from terrestrial concern. Our thoughts are matter, says science, say every energy produces more or less of a disturbance in the atmospheric waves. Therefore, as every man, in common with every other living and even inert object, has an aura of his own emanations surrounding him, that is the divine chakra, and, moreover, is enabled by a trifling effort to transport himself in imagination wherever he likes, that is not everybody, why is it scientifically impossible that his thought, regulated, intensified, and guided by that powerful magician, the educated will, may become corporealized for the time being, and appear to whom it likes a faithful double of the original? Is the proposition, in the present state of science, any more unthinkable than the photograph or telegraph were less than 40 years ago, or the telephone less than 14 months ago? If the sensitized plate can so accurately seize upon the shadow of our faces, then this shadow, or reflection, although we are unable to perceive it, must be something substantial. And if we can, with the help of optical instruments, project our semblances upon a white wall at several hundred feet distance, sometimes then there is no reason why the adepts, the alchemists, the savants of the secret art, should not have already found out that which the scientists deny today, but may discover true tomorrow. An example, how to project electrically their astral bodies in an instant through thousands of miles of space, leaving their material shells with a certain amount of animal vital principle to keep the physical life going, and acting within their spiritual ethereal bodies as safely and intelligently as when clothed with the covering of flesh. There is a higher form of electricity than the physical one known to experimenters. 1,000 correlations of the latter are as yet veiled to the eye of the modern physicist, and none can tell where end its possibilities. Schott explains that by Cyan or Shin-Cyan are understood in the old Chinese conception, and particularly in that of the Tao Kaiao Teosei sect, persons who withdraw to the hills to lead the life of anchorites, and who have attained, either through their ascetic observances or by the power of charms and elixirs, to the possession of miraculous gifts and of terrestrial immortality. This is exaggerated, if not altogether erroneous. What they claim is merely their ability to prolong human life, and they can do so if we have to believe human testimony. What Marco Polo testifies to in the 13th century is corroborated in our own days. There are another class of people called Shungi, yogi, he says, who are indeed properly called Brahmins, who are extremely long-lived. every man of them living to 150 or 200 years. They eat very little, rice and milk chiefly, and these people make use of a very strange beverage, a potion of silver and quicksilver mixed together, and this they drink twice every month. This, they say, gives them long life, and it is a potion they are used to take from their childhood. Okay, we're going to talk about it because sulfur, okay, maybe you can find a medicinal use for sulfur, but quicksilver is mercury. Mercury will kill you. That is not even like disputed, right? That is not a conspiracy. There is no grand conspiracy to take mercury away from you. Mercury will kill you. It is a fact. It will drive you mad and then kill you. So if they were drinking this, they were not living to 150 or 200 years. Period, the end. I'm not even going to entertain the possibility of that, and I normally do entertain possibilities. Bernier shows, says Colonel Yule, the yogis very skillful in preparing mercury, so admirably that 1 or 2 grains taken every morning restore the body to perfect health. And adds that the mercurius vitae of Paracelsus was a compound in which entered antimony and quicksilver. This is a very careless statement, to say the least, and we will explain what we know of it. The longevity of some llamas and talapoins is proverbial. It is generally known that they use some compound which renews the old blood, as they call it, and it was equally a recognized fact with the alchemists that a judicious administration of aura of silver does restore health and prolongs life to a wonderful extent. But we are fully prepared to oppose the statements of both Bernier and Colonel Yule, who quotes him, that it is mercury or quicksilver which the yogis or alchemists. Okay, I'm fine with that. The yogis, in the days of Marco Polo, as well as in our modern time, do use that which may appear to be quicksilver, but is not. Paracelsus, the alchemist, and other mystics meant by mercurius vitae, the living spirit of silver, the aura of silver, not the argent vivae. And this aura is certainly not the mercury known to our physicians and druggists. There can be no doubt that the imputation that Paracelsus introduced mercury into medical practice is utterly incorrect. No mercury, whether prepared by a medieval fire philosopher or a modern self-styled physician, can, or ever did, restore the body to perfect health. Only an unmitigated charlatan will ever use such a drug. Okay, I'm perfectly fine with this. I had to point that out because that was exceptionally dangerous. And it is in the opinion of many that it is just with the wicked intention of presenting Paracelsus into the eyes of posterity as a quack that his enemies have invented such a preposterous lie. The yogis of the olden times, as well as the modern lamas and talapoin, use a certain ingredient with a minimum of sulfur and a milky juice which they extract from a medicinal plant. They must certainly be possessed of some wonderful secrets, as we have seen them healing the most rebellious wounds in a few days, restoring broken bones to good use in as many hours as it would take days to do by means of common surgery. A fearful fever contracted by the writer near Rangoon after a flood of the Irrawaddy River was cured in a few hours by the juice of a plant called, if we mistake not, cucushan, though there may be thousands of natives ignorant of its virtues who were left to die of fever. This was in return for a trifling kindness we had done to a simple mendicant, a service which can interest the reader but little. We have heard of a certain water, also called Abi Hayat, which the popular superstition thinks hidden from every mortal eye, except that of the holy Sannyasi, the fountain itself being known as the Abi Hayawani. It is more than probable, though, that the talapoin will decline to deliver up their secrets even to academicians and missionaries, as these remedies must be used for the benefit of humanity, never for money. At the great festivals of Hindu pagodas, at the marriage feast of rich high caste, everywhere where large crowds are gathered, Europeans find guni, or serpent charmers, fakir mesmerizers, thumb working sannyasi, sannyasi, and so-called jugglers. To deride is easy, to explain rather more troublesome, to science impossible. The British residents of India and the travelers prefer the first expedient. But let anyone ask one of the Thomases how the following results, which they cannot and do not deny, are produced. When crowds of Guni and fakirs appear with their bodies encircled with cobras de capello, their arms ornamented with bracelets of coralitos, diminutive snakes inflicting certain death in a few seconds, and their shoulders with necklaces of trigonocephaly, the most terrible enemy of naked Hindu feet, whose bite kills like a flash of lightning. These skeptic witnesses smiles and gravely proceeds to explain how these reptiles, having been thrown into a cataleptic torpor, were all deprived by the Guni of their fangs. They are harmless, and it is ridiculous to fear them. Will the Sahib caress one of my nag? Asked once a Guni approaching the interlocutor, who had been thus humbling his listeners with his herpetological achievements for a full half-hour. Rapidly jumping back, the brave warrior's feet proving no less nimble than his tongue, Captain B's angry answer could hardly be immortalized by us in print. Only say the Guni's terrible bodyguard saved him from an unceremonious thrashing. Besides, say a word, and for a half rupee, any professional serpent charmer will begin creeping about and summon around in a few moments numbers of untamed serpents of the most poisonous species, and will handle them and encircle his body with them. On 2 occasions, in the neighborhood of Trinquet Mall, a serpent was ready to strike at the rider, who had once nearly sat on his tail, but both times, at a rapid whistle of the Guni, whom we had hired to accompany us, it stopped. Hardly a few inches from our body, as if arrested by lightning, and slowly sinking its menacing head to the ground, remained stiff and motionless as a dead branch, under the charm of the Kilna. Will any European juggler, tamer, or even mesmerizer risk repeating just once an experiment that may be daily witnessed in India, if you know where to see it? There is nothing in the world more ferocious than a Royal Bengal tiger. Once the whole population of a small village, not far from Dhaka, situated on the confines of a jungle, was thrown into a panic at the appearance of an enormous tigress. At the dawn of the day, these wild beasts never leave their dens but at night, when they go searching for prey and for water. But this unusual circumstance was due to the fact that the beast was a mother and had been deprived of her 2 cubs, which had been carried away by a daring hunter, and she was in search of them. 2 men and a child had already become her victims, when an aged fakir, bent on his daily round, emerging from the gate of the pagoda, saw the situation and understood it at a glance. Chanting a mantram, he went straight to the beast, which, with flaming eye and foaming mouth, crouched near a tree ready for a new victim. When about 10 feet from the tigress, without interrupting his modulated prayer, the words of which no layman comprehends, he began a regular process of mesmerization, as we understood it. He made passes. A terrific howl, which struck the chill into the heart of every human being in the place, was then heard. This long, ferocious, drawling howl gradually subsided into a series of plaintive, broken sobs, as if the bereaved mother was uttering her complaints. And then, to the terror of the crowd, which had taken refuge on trees and in the houses, the beast made a tremendous leap on the holy man, as they thought. They were mistaken. She was at his feet, rolling in the dust and writhing. A few moments more, and she remained motionless, with her enormous head laid on her forepaws, and her bloodshot but now mild eye riveted on the face of the fakir. Then the holy man of prayer sat beside the tigress and tenderly smoothed her striped skin, and patted her back until her groans became fainter and fainter. And half an hour later, all the village was standing around this group, the fakir's head lying on the tigress's back as on a pillow, his right hand on her head and his left thrown on the sod under the terrible mouth, from which the long red protruding tongue was gently licking it. This is the way the fakirs tame the wildest beast in India. Can European tamers with their white-hot iron rods do as much? Of course, every fakir is not endowed with such a power. Comparatively few are. And yet the actual number is large. How are they trained to these requirements in the pagodas will remain an eternal secret to all except the Brahmins and the adepts in occult mysteries. The stories, hitherto considered fables of Krishna and Orpheus charming the wild beasts, thus receives this corroboration in our day. There is one fact which remains undeniable. There is not a single European in India who could have or ever has boasted of having penetrated into the enclosed sanctuary within the pagodas. Neither authority nor money has ever induced a Brahmin to allow an uninitiated foreigner to pass the threshold of the reserved precinct. To use authority in such a case would be equivalent to throwing a lighted taper into a powder magazine. The Hindus, mild, patient, long-suffering, whose very apathy saved the British from being driven out of the country in 1857, would raise their 100 millions of devotees as one man at such a profanation. Regardless of sex or caste, they would exterminate every Christian. The East India Company knew this well and built her stronghold on the friendship of the Brahmins, and by paying subsidy to the pagodas. And the British government is as prudent as its predecessor. It is the caste and non-interference with the prevailing religions that secure its comparative authority in India. But we must once more recur to shamanism, that strange and most despised of all surviving religions, spirit worship. Its followers have neither altars nor idols, and it is upon the authority of a shaman priest that we state that their true rites, which they are bound to perform only once a year, on the shortest day of winter, cannot take place before any stranger to their faith. Therefore, we are confident that all descriptions hitherto given in the Asiatic Journal and other European works are but guesswork. The Russians, who, from constant intercourse with the shamans in Siberia and Tartary, would be the most competent of all persons to judge of their religion, have learned nothing except of the personal proficiency of these men in what they are half inclined to believe clever jugglery. Many Russian residents, though, in Siberia, are firmly convinced of the supernatural powers of the shamans. Whenever they assemble to worship, it is always in an open space, or on a high hill, or in the hidden depths of the forest. In this, reminding us of the old druidical rites. Their ceremonies, upon the occasions of births, deaths, and marriages, are but a trifling parts of their worship. They comprise offerings, the sprinkling of the fire with spirits and milk, and weird hymns, or rather magical incantations, intoned by the officiating shaman, and concluding with a chorus of the persons present. The numerous small bells of brass and iron worn by them on the priestly robe of deerskin, or the pelt of some other animal reputed magnetic, are used to drive away the malevolent spirits of the air, a superstition shared by all the nations of old, including Romans, and even the Jews, whose golden bells tell the story. They have iron staves also covered with bells for the same reason. When, after certain ceremonies, the desired crisis is reached, and the spirit has spoken, and the priest, who may be either male or female, fears its overpowering influence, the hand of the shaman is drawn by some occult power toward the top of the staff, which is commonly covered with hieroglyphics. With his palm pressing upon it, he then raises to a considerable height in the air, where he remains for some time. Sometimes he leaps to an extraordinary height, and, according to the control, for he is often but an irresponsible medium, pours out prophecies and describes future events. Thus it was that in 1847 a shaman in a distant part of Siberia prophesied and accurately detailed the issue of the Crimean War. The particulars of the prognostication, being carefully noted by those present at the time, were all verified 6 years after this occurrence. Although usually ignorant of even the name of astronomy, let alone having studied this science, they often prophesy eclipses and other astronomical phenomena. When consulted about thefts and murders, they invariably point out the guilty parties. The shamans of Siberia are all ignorant and illiterate. Those of Tartary and Tibet, few in number, are mostly learned men in their own way, and would not allow themselves to fall under the control of spirits of any kind. The former are mediums in the full sense of the word, the latter magicians. It is not surprising that pious and superstitious persons, after seeing one of such crises, should declare the shaman to be under demoniacal possession. As in the instances of corybantic and bacchiantic fury among the ancient Greeks, the spiritual crisis of the shaman exhibits itself in violent dancing and wild gestures. Little by little the lookers-on feel the spirit of imitation aroused in them. Seized with an irresistible impulse, they dance and become, in their turn, ecstatics. And he who begins by joining the chorus gradually and unconsciously takes part in the gesticulations until he sinks to the ground, exhausted and often dying. O young girl, a god possesses thee. It is either Pan or Hecate, or the venerable Corybantes or Sibyl that agitates thee, the chorus says, addressing Phaedra and Euripides. This form of psychological epidemic has been too well known from the time of the Middle Ages to cite instances from it. The Chorea Sanctiviti is an historical fact and spread throughout Germany. Paracelsus cured quite a number of persons possessed of such a spirit of imitation. But he was a Kabbalist and therefore accused, by his enemies, of having cast out devils by the power of a stronger demon, which he was believed to carry about with him in the hilt of his sword. The Christian judges of those days of horror found a better and surer remedy. Voltaire states that in the district of Jura, between 1598 and 1600, over 600 lycanthropes were put to death by a pious judge. I bet that wasn't real. But while the illiterate shaman is a victim, and during his crisis sometimes sees the persons present under the shape of various animals, and often makes them share his hallucination, his brother shaman, learned in the mysteries of the priestly colleges of Tibet, expels the elementary creature, which can produce the hallucination as well as a living mesmerizer, not through the help of a stronger demon, but simply through his knowledge of the nature of the invisible enemy. Where academicians have failed, as in the cases of Seminois, a shaman or a laman would soon have put an end to the epidemic. We have mentioned a kind of carnelian stone in our possession, which had such an unexpected and favorable effect upon the shaman's decision. Every shaman has such a talisman, which he wears attached to a string and carries under his left arm. Of what use is it to you, and what are its virtues? Was the question we often offered to our guide. To this he never answered directly, but evaded all explanation, promising that as soon as an opportunity was offered, and we were alone, he would ask the stone to answer for himself. With this very indefinite hope, we were left to the resources of our own imagination. But the day on which the stone spoke came very soon. It was during the most critical hours of our life, at a time when the vagabond nature of the traveler had carried the writer to far-off lands where neither civilization is known nor security can be guaranteed for 1 hour. One afternoon, as every man and woman had left the yurta, Tartar tent, that had been our home for over 2 months, to witness the ceremony of the Lamic exorcism of a Shutagor, accused of breaking and spiriting away every bit of the poor furniture and earthenware of a family living about 2 miles distant, the shaman, who had become our only protector in these dreary deserts, was reminded of his promise. He sighed and hesitated, but after a short silence left his place on the sheepskin, and going outside, placed a dried-up goat's head with its prominent horns over a wooden peg, and then, dropping down the felt curtain of the tent, remarked that now no living person would venture in, for the goat's head was a sign that he was at work. After that, placing his hand in his bosom, he drew out the little stone, about the size of a walnut, and, carefully unwrapping it, proceeded, as it appeared, to swallow it. In a few moments his limbs stiffened, his body became rigid, and he fell, cold and motionless as a corpse, but for a slight twitching of his lips at every question asked. The scene would have been embarrassing, nay, dreadful. The sun was setting, and were it not that the dying embers flickered at the center of the tent, complete darkness would have been added to the oppressive silence which reigned. We have lived in the prairies of the West, and in the boundless steppes of southern Russia, but nothing can be compared with the silence at sunset on the sandy deserts of Mongolia. Not even the barren solitudes of the deserts of Africa, though the former are partially inhabited, and the latter utterly void of life. Yet there was the writer alone, with what looked no better than a corpse lying on the ground. Fortunately, the state did not last long. "Mahando," uttered a voice which seemed to come from the bowels of the earth on which the shaman was prostrated. "Peace be with you. What would you have me do for you?" Startling as the fact seemed, we were quite prepared for it, for we had seen other shamans pass through similar performances. "Whoever you are," we pronounced mentally, "go to K, and try to bring that person's thought here. See what the other party does, and tell what we are doing, and how situated." "I am there," answered the same voice. "The old lady, Kokona, is sitting in the garden. She is putting on her spectacles and reading a letter." "The contents of it in hasten," was the hurried order, while preparing notebook and pencil. The contents were given slowly, as if, while dictating, the invisible presence desired to afford us time to put down the words phonetically, for we recognized the Wallachian language, of which we knew nothing beyond the ability to recognize it. In such a way the whole page was filled. "Look west, toward the third pole of the yurta," pronounced the Tartar in his natural voice, though it sounded hollow, as if coming from afar. "Her thought is here." Then, with a convulsive jerk, the upper portion of the shaman's body seemed raised, and his head fell heavily on the writer's feet, which he clutched with both his hands. The position was becoming less and less attractive, but curiosity proved a good ally to courage. In the west corner was standing, lifelike but flickering, unsteady and mist-like, the form of a dear old friend, a Romanian lady of Wallachia, a mystic by disposition, but a thorough disbeliever in this kind of occult phenomena. "Her thought is here, but her body is lying unconscious. We could not bring her here otherwise," said the voice. We addressed and supplicated the apparition to answer, but all in vain. The features moved, and the form gesticulated as if in fear and agony, but no sound broke forth from the shadowy lips. Only we imagined, perchance it was fancy, hearing, as if from a long distance, the Romanian words, "Non se pote," it cannot be done. For over 2 hours, the most substantial, unequivocal proofs that the shaman's astral soul was traveling at the bidding of our unspoken wish were given to us. 10 months later, we received a letter from our Wallachian friend in response to ours, in which we had enclosed the page from the notebook, inquiring of her what she had been doing on that day and describing the scene in full. She was sitting, she wrote, in the garden on that morning, prosaically occupied in boiling some conserves. The letter sent to her was word for word the copy of the one received by her from her brother. All at once, in consequence of the heat, she thought she fainted, and remembered distinctly dreaming that she saw the writer in the desert place which she accurately described, and sitting under a gypsy's tent, as she expressed it. "Henceforth," she added, "I can doubt no longer." But our experiment was proved still better. We had directed the shaman's inner ego to the same friend heretofore mentioned in this chapter, the Kuchi of Lhasa, who travels constantly to British India and back. We know that he was apprised of our critical situation in the desert, for a few hours later came help, and we were rescued by a party of 25 horsemen, who had been directed by their chief to find us at the place where we were, which no living man endowed with common powers could have known. The chief of this escort was a chaperone, an adept, whom we had never seen before, nor did we after that, for he never left his sume, lamasery, and we could have no access to it. but he was a personal friend of the Kuchi. The above will, of course, provoke naught but incredulity in the general reader, but we write for those who will believe, who, like the writer, understand and know the illimitable powers and possibilities of the human astral soul. In this case, we willingly believe, nay, we know, that the spiritual double of the shaman did not act alone, for he was no adept but simply a medium. According to a favorite expression of his, as soon as he placed the stone in his mouth, his father appeared, dragging him out of his skin and took him wherever he wanted. And at his bidding, one who has only witnessed the chemical, optical, mechanical, and sleight-of-hand performances of European prestidigitateurs is not prepared to see, without amazement, the open-air and offhand exhibitions of Hindu jugglers, to say nothing of fakirs. Of the mere display of deceptive dexterity we make no account, for Houdin and others far excel them in that respect. Or do we dwell upon feats that permit of confederacy, whether resorted to or not? It is unquestionably true that non-expert travelers, especially if of an imaginative turn of mind, exaggerate inordinately. But our remark is based upon a class of phenomena not to be accounted for upon any of the familiar hypotheses. "I have seen," says a gentleman who resided in India, "a man throw up into the air a number of balls, numbered in succession from one upward. As each went up, there was no deception about their going up. The ball was seen clearly in the air, getting smaller and smaller, till it disappeared altogether out of sight. When they were all up, 20 or more, the operator would politely ask which ball you wanted to see, and then would shout out number 1, number 15, and so on, as instructed by the spectators. When the ball demanded would bound to his feet violently from some remote distance. These fellows have very scanty clothing and apparently no apparatus whatever. Then I have seen them swallow 3 different colored powers, and then, throwing back the head, wash them down with water, drunk, in the native fashion, in a continuous stream from a lota, or brass pot, held at arm's length from the lips, and keep on drinking till the swollen body could not hold another drop, and water overflowed from the lips. Then these fellows, after squirting out the water in their mouths, have spat out the 3 powders on a clean piece of paper, dry and unmixed." In the eastern portion of Turkey and Persia have dwelt from time immemorial the warlike tribes of Kurdistan. This people, of purely Indo-European origin and without a drop of Semitic blood in them, though some ethnologists seem to think otherwise, notwithstanding their brigand-like disposition, unite in themselves the mysticism of the Hindu and the practices of the Assyrio-Chaldean magicians, vast portions of whose territory they have helped themselves to, and will not give up, to please either Turkey or even all Europe. Nominally, Mohammedans of the sect of Omar, their rites and doctrines are purely magical and Magian. Even those who are Christian Nestorians are Christians but in name. The Chaldani, numbering nearly 100,000 men, with their 2 patriarchs, are undeniably rather Manichaeans than Nestorians. Many of them are Yazidis. One of these tribes is noted for its fire-worshipping predilections. At sunrise and sunset, the horsemen alight and, turning towards the sun, mutter a prayer, while at every new moon they perform mysterious rites throughout the whole night. They have a tent set apart for the purpose, and its thick, black, woolen fabric is decorated with weird signs worked in bright red and yellow. In the center is placed a kind of altar, encircled by 3 brass bands, to which are suspended numerous rings by ropes of camel's hair, which every worshipper holds with his right hand during the ceremony. On the altar burns a curious old-fashioned silver lamp, a relic found possibly among the ruins of Persepolis. This lamp, with 3 wicks, is an oblong cup with a handle to it, and is evidently of the class of Egyptian sepulchral lamps once found in such profusion in the subterranean caves of Memphis, if we may believe Kircher. It widened on its end towards the middle, and its upper part was of the shape of a heart, the aperture for the wicks forming a triangle, and its center being covered by an inverted heliotrope attached to a gracefully curved stalk proceeding from the handle of the lamp. This ornament clearly bespoke its origin. It was one of the sacred vessels used in sun worship. The Greeks gave the heliotrope its name from its strange propensity to ever incline towards the sun. The ancient Magi used it in their worship, and who knows but Darius had performed the mysterious rites, with its triple light illuminating the face of the king Hierophant. If we mention the lamp at all, it is because there happened to be a strange story in connection with it. What the Kurds do during their normal nocturnal rites of lunar worship, we know but from hearsay, for they conceal it carefully, and no stranger could be admitted to witness the ceremony. But every tribe has one old man, sometimes several, regarded as holy beings, who know the past and can divulge the secrets of the future. These are greatly honored and generally resorted to for information in cases of theft, murders, or danger. Traveling from one tribe to another, we passed some time in company with these Kurds. As our object is not autobiographical, we omit all details that have no immediate bearing upon some occult fact, and even of these have room but for a few. We will then simply state that a very expensive saddle, a carpet, and 2 Circassian daggers, richly mounted and chiseled in gold, had been stolen from the tent, and that the Kurds, with the chief of the tribe at the head, had come, taking Allah for their witness that the culprit could not belong to their tribe. We believed it, for it would have been unprecedented among the nomadic tribes of Asia, as famed for the sacredness in which they hold their guests, as for the ease with which they plunder and occasionally murder them, when once they have passed the boundaries of their Aul. A suggestion was then made by a Georgian belonging to our caravan to have resort to the light of the Kudian, sorcerer of their tribe. This was arranged in great secrecy and solemnity, and the interview appointed to take place at midnight, when the moon would be at its full. At the stated hour we were conducted to the above described tent. A large hole or square aperture was managed in the arched roof of the tent, and through it poured in vertically the radiant moonbeams, mingling with the vacillating triple flame of the little lamp. After several minutes of incantations, addressed, as it seemed to us, to the moon, the conjurer, an old man of tremendous stature, whose pyramidal turban touched the top of the tent, produced a round looking-glass of the kind known as Persian mirrors. Having unscrewed its cover, he then proceeded to breathe on it for over 10 minutes, and wipe off the moisture from the surface with a package of herbs, muttering incantations the while sotto voce. After every wiping, the glass became more and more brilliant, till the crystal seemed to radiate refulgent phosphoric rays in every direction. At last the operation was ended. The old man, with the mirror in his hand, remained as motionless as if he had been a statue. "Look, Hanum, look steadily," he whispered, hardly moving his lips. Shadows and dark spots began gathering, where, one moment before, nothing was reflected but the radiant face of the full moon. A few more seconds, and there appeared a well-known saddle, carpet, and daggers, which seemed to be rising from a deep, clear water, and becoming with every instant more definitely outlined. Then a still darker shadow appeared, hovering over these objects, which gradually condensed itself, and then came out, as visibly as at the end of a telescope, the full figure of a man crouching over them. "I know him!" exclaimed the writer. "It is the Tatar who came to us last night offering to sell his mule." The image disappeared as if by enchantment. The old man nodded assent, but remained motionless. Then he muttered again some strange words, and suddenly began a song. The tune was slow and monotonous, but after he had sung a few stanzas in the same unknown tongue, without changing either rhythm or tune, he pronounced, recitative-like, the following words in his broken Russian. "Now, Hanum, look well. Whether we will catch him, the fate of the robber we will learn this night," etc. The same shadows began gathering, and then, Almost without transition, we saw the man lying on his back in a pool of blood across the saddle, and two other men galloping off at a distance. Horror-stricken and sick at the sight of this picture, we desired to see no more. The old man, leaving the tent, called some of the Kurds standing outside and seemed to give them instructions. 2 minutes later, a dozen of horsemen were galloping off at full speed down the side of the mountain on which we were encamped. Early in the morning they returned with the lost objects. The saddle was all covered with coagulated blood and, of course, abandoned to them. The story they told was that, upon coming in sight of the fugitive, they saw disappearing over the crest of a distant hill 2 horsemen, and upon riding up, the Tartar thief was found dead upon the stolen property, exactly as we had seen him in the magical glass. He had been murdered by the 2 banditti, whose evident design was to rob him, was interrupted by the sudden appearance of the party sent by the old Kurdian. The most remarkable results are produced by the Eastern wise men, by the simple act of breathing upon a person, whether with good or evil intent. This is pure mesmerism, and among the Persian dervishes who practice it, the animal magnetism is often reinforced by that of the elements. If a person happens to stand facing a certain wind, there is always danger, they think, and many of the learned ones in occult matters can never be prevailed to go, at sunset, in a certain direction from whence blows the wind. We have known an old Persian from Baku on the Caspian Sea who had the most unenviable reputation for throwing spells through the timely help of this wind, which blows but too often at that town, as its Persian name itself shows. If a victim, against whom the wrath of the old fiend was kindled, happened to be facing this wind, he would appear, as if by enchantment, cross the road rapidly and breathe in his face. From that moment, the latter would find himself afflicted with every evil. He was under the spell of the evil eye. The employment of the human breath by the sorcerer as an adjunct for the accomplishment of his nefarious purpose is strikingly illustrated in several terrible cases recorded in the French annals, notably those of several Catholic priests. In fact, this species of sorcery was known from the oldest times. The Emperor Constantine, in Statute for Code de Malif, etc., prescribed the severest penalties against such as should employ sorcery to do violence to chastity and excite unlawful passion. Augustine, Cité de Dieu, warns against it. Jerome, Gregory, Nazianzen, and many other ecclesiastical authorities lend their denunciation of a crime not uncommon among the clergy. Baffin relates the case of the cure of Pifani, who accomplished the ruin of a highly respected and virtuous lady parishioner, the Dame de Leu, by resort to sorcery, and was burned alive for it by the Parliament of Grenoble. In 1611, a priest named Gaufridi was burned by the Parliament of Providence for seducing a penitent at the confessional, named Magdalene de la Palude, by breathing upon her and thus throwing her into a delirium of sinful love for him. The above cases are cited in the official report of the famous case of Father Gerard, a Jesuit priest of very great influence, who, in 1731, was tried before the Parliament of Aix, France, for the seduction of his parishioner, Mademoiselle Catherine Carrière of Toulon, and certain revolting crimes in connection with the same. The indictment charged that the offense was brought about by resort to sorcery. Mademoiselle Carrière was a young lady, noted for her beauty, piety, and exemplary virtues. Her attention to her religious duties was exceptionally rigorous, and that was the cause of her perdition. Father Gerard's eye fell upon her, and he began to maneuver for her ruin. Gaining the confidence of the girl and her family by his apparent great sanctity, he one day made a pretext to blow his breath upon her. The girl became instantly affected with a violent passion for him. She also had ecstatic visions of a religious character, stigmata, or blood marks of the passion, and hysterical convulsions. The long-sought opportunity of seclusion with his penitent finally offering, The Jesuit breathed upon her again, and before the poor girl recovered her senses, his object had been accomplished. By sophistry and the excitation of her religious fervor, he kept up this illicit relation for months without her suspecting that she had done anything wrong. Finally, however, her eyes were opened, her parents informed, and the priest was arraigned. Judgment was rendered October 12, 1731. Of 25 judges, 12 voted to send him to the stake. The criminal priest was defended by the power of the Society of Jesus, and it is said that 1,000,000 francs were spent in trying to suppress the evidence produced at the trial. The facts, however, were printed in a work, now rare, entitled Recueil Général des Pièces continuées approches de Père Jean-Baptiste Giraud, Jésuite, etc., etc. We have noted the circumstance that, while under the sorcerous influence of Father Gerard and in illicit relations with him, Mademoiselle Carrier's body was marked with the stigmata of the passions, vis-a-vis the bleeding wounds of thorns on her brow, of nails in her hands and feet, and of a lance cut in her side. It should be added that the same marks were seen upon the bodies of 6 other penitents of this priest, vis-a-vis Mesdames Goyot, Mlugier, Grodier, Alamonde, Battarel, and Rebu. In fact, it became commonly remarked that Father Gerard's handsome parishioners were strangely given to ecstasies and stigmata. Add this to the fact that, in the case of Father Golfridi, as above noted, the same thing was proved, upon surgical testimony, to have happened to Mademoiselle de Pelude, and we have something worthy of the attention of all, especially spiritualists, who imagine these stigmata are produced by pure spirits. Barring the agency of the devil, whom we have quietly put to rest in another chapter, Catholics would be puzzled, we fancy, despite all their infallibility, to distinguish between the stigmata of the sorcerers and those produced through the intervention of the Holy Ghost or the angels. The Church records abound in instances of alleged diabolical imitations of these signs of saintship. But, as we have remarked, the devil is out of court. By those who have followed us thus far, it will naturally be asked to what practical issue this book tends. Much has been said about magic and its potentiality, much of the immense antiquity of its practice. Do we wish to affirm that the occult sciences ought to be studied and practiced throughout the world? Will we replace modern spiritualism with the ancient magic? Neither. The substitution could not be made, nor the study universally prosecuted, without incurring the risk of enormous public dangers. At this moment, a well-known spiritualist and lecturer on mesmerism is imprisoned on the charge of raping a subject whom he had hypnotized. A sorcerer is a public enemy, and mesmerism may most readily be turned into the worst of sorceries. We would have neither scientists, theologians, nor spiritualists turn practical magicians, but all to realize that there was true science, profound religion, and genuine phenomena before this modern era. We would that all who have a voice in the education of the masses should first know and then teach that the safest guides to human happiness and enlightenment are those writings which have descended to us from the remotest antiquity, and that nobler spiritual aspirations and a higher average morality prevail in the countries where the people take their precepts as the rule of their lives. We would have all to realize that magical, in example, spiritual powers exist in every man, and that those few to practice them who feel called to teach, and are ready to pay the price of discipline and self-consequence which their development exacts. Many men have arisen who had glimpses of the truth and fancied they had it all. Such have failed to achieve the good they might have done and sought to do, because vanity has made them thrust their personality into such undue prominence as to interpose it between their believers and the whole truth that lay behind. The world needs no sectarian church, whether of Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, Swedenborg, Calvin, or any other. There is but one truth. Man requires but one church, the temple of God within us, walled in by matter, but penetrable by anyone who could find the way. The pure in heart see God. The trinity of nature is the lock of magic, the trinity of man, the key that fits it. Within the solemn precincts of the sanctuary, the Supreme had and has no name. It is unthinkable and unpronounceable, and yet every man finds in himself his God. Who art thou, O fair being? Inquires the disembodied soul in the Corda Avesta, at the gates of paradise. I am, O soul, thy good and pure thoughts, thy works and thy good law, thy angel and thy God. Then, then man, or the soul, is reunited with itself, for this Son of God is one with him. It is his own mediator, the God of his human soul and his justifier. God not revealing himself immediately to man, the Spirit is his interpreter, says Plato in The Banquet. Besides, there are many good reasons why the study of magic, except in its broad philosophy, is nearly impracticable in Europe and America. Magic, being what it is, the most difficult of all sciences to learn experimentally. Its acquisition is practically beyond the reach of the majority of white-skinned people. Number one, racist. Number two, we are going to get there because I am writing the book that is going to allow this to happen. And that, whether their effort is made at home or in the East, probably not more than 1 man in a million of European blood is fitted, either physically, morally, or psychologically, to become a practical magician. And not 1 in 10 millions would be found endowed with all these 3 qualifications as required for the work. I don't necessarily dispute that. I talk all the time about the only difference between me and you is dedication and the actual willingness to do the things which I believe I am called to do. That is exactly what she's saying right here, is that you can do it, but you choose not to do it because of your beliefs and because of your lack of discipline. That is why you are not able to achieve the things. Now, I am trying to, in the book that I'm writing, I am trying to be as clear as I try to be here, right? I'm trying to outline the steps which I have taken, which have allowed me to do the things that she writes about but never actually practiced for herself. Civilized nations lack the phenomenal powers of endurance, both mental and physical, of the Easterns. The favoring temperamental and the idiosyncrasies of the Orientals are utterly wanting in them. Also, with the caveat, I say she didn't do them herself because of things she has said in here. We are going to be doing The Secret Doctrine, which is another book along the same lines but with more revelation, hopefully, according to what some of my comments have said. And it is entirely possible that she did actually practice these things. Whether or not that is in the correct manner, we will decide as we go along through that particular work, which will be the next one we will be starting next week. In the Hindu, the Arabian, the Tibetan, an intuitive perception of the possibilities of occult natural forces in subjection to human will comes by inheritance, and in them the physical senses as well as the spiritual are far more finely developed than in the Western races. And again, that goes back to the belief that we talked about in the very beginning of this video. Notwithstanding the notable difference of thickness between the skulls of a European and a Southern Hindu, this difference, being a purely climatic result due to the intensity of the sun's rays, involves no psychological principles. Furthermore, there would be tremendous difficulties in the way of training, if we can so express it. Contaminated by centuries of dogmatic superstition, by an ineradicable, though quite unwarranted, sense of superiority over those whom the English term so contemptuously niggers, the white European would hardly submit himself to the practical tuition of either Copt, Brahmin, or Lama. I want to point out right here, for the one particular person who made the comment about Helena being a Nazi, she is repudiating that particular ideology right here in this sentence. And if you are offended by me using the word nigger, you do not understand that we are reading this, and I do not mean that, and you should watch my origin story so that you can understand that I believe that we are all of the same race, and that melanin is the least of our differentiation. To become a neophyte, one must be ready to devote himself heart and soul to the study of mystic sciences. Magic, most imperative of mistresses, brooks no rival. Unlike other sciences, a theoretical knowledge of formulae without mental capacities or soul powers is utterly useless in magic. The spirit must hold in complete subjection the combativeness of what is loosely termed educated reason, until facts have vanquished cold human sophistry. Those best prepared to appreciate occultism are the spiritualists, although, through prejudice, until now they have been the bitterest opponents to its introduction to public notice. Despite all foolish negations and denunciations, their phenomena are real. Despite, also, their own assertions, they are wholly misunderstood by themselves. The totally insufficient theory of the constant agency of disembodied human spirits in their production have been a bane of the cause. 1,000 mortifying rebuffs have failed to open their reason or intuition to the truth. Ignoring the teachings of the past, they have discovered no substitute. We offer them philosophical deduction instead of unverifiable hypotheses, scientific analysis and demonstration instead of undiscriminating faith. Occult philosophy gives them the means of meeting the reasonable requirements of science and frees them from the humiliating necessity to accept the oracular teachings of intelligences, which, as a rule, have less intelligence than a child at school. So based and so strengthened, modern phenomena would be in a position to command the attention and enforce the respect of those who carry with them public opinion. Without invoking such help, spiritualism must continue to vegetate, equally repulsed, not without cause, both by scientists and theologians. In its modern aspect, it is neither a science, a religion, nor a philosophy. Are we unjust? Does any intelligent spiritualist complain that we have misstated the case? To what can he point us but to a confusion of theories, a tangle of hypotheses mutually contradictory? Can he affirm that spiritualism, even with its 30 years of phenomena, has any defensible philosophy? Nay, that there is anything like an established method that is generally accepted and followed by its recognized representatives? And yet there are many thoughtful, scholarly, earnest writers among the spiritualists scattered the world over. There are men who, in addition to a scientific mental training and a reasoned faith in the phenomena per se, possess all the requisites of leaders of the movement. How is it then that except throwing off an isolated volume or so, or occasional contributions to journalism, they all refrain from taking any active part in the formation of a system of philosophy? This is from no lack of moral courage, as their writings well show, nor because of indifference, for enthusiasm abounds and they are sure of their facts. Nor is it from a lack of capacity, because many are men of mark, the peers of our best minds. It is simply for the reason that, almost without exception, they are bewildered by the contradictions they encounter, and wait for their tentative hypotheses to be verified by further experience. Doubtless this is part of the wisdom. It is that adopted by Newton, who, with the heroism of an honest, unselfish heart, withheld for 17 years the promulgation of his theory of gravitation, only because he had not verified it to his own satisfaction. Spiritualism, whose aspect is rather that of aggression than of a defense, has tended towards iconoclasm, and so far has done well. But in pulling down, it does not rebuild. Every really substantial truth it erects is soon buried under an avalanche of chimeras, until all are one confused ruin. At every step of advance, at the acquisition of every new vantage ground of fact, some cataclysm, either in the shape of fraud or exposure, or of premeditated treachery, occurs, and throws the spiritualists back powerless, because they cannot, and their invisible friends will not, or perchance can, less than themselves, make good their claims. Their fatal weakness is that they have but one theory to offer in explanation of their challenged facts: the agency of human disembodied spirits, and the medium's complete subjection to them. They will attack those who differ in views with them with a vehemence only warranted by a better cause. They will regard every argument contradicting their theory as an imputation upon their common sense and powers of observation, and they will positively refuse even to argue the question. How, then, can spiritualism ever be elevated to a distinction of a science? Working on that. This, as Professor Tyndall shows, includes three absolutely necessary elements: observation of facts, induction of laws from these facts, and verification of those laws by constant practical experience. That's what I'm doing. If you are unaware, I have healed myself. Now, if you've made it all the way through this and you didn't know that, you have not been paying attention, but I don't mention it in every video. I was unable to talk in this tone of voice a year ago. That is a fact. I had uncontrollable tremors across the left side of my body a year ago. That is a fact. I was having difficulty moving and doing things a year ago. That is a fact. I had a cyst in my throat. All of these things are facts. They are things that I have medical proof of. The tremors are gone. The cyst is gone. My voice is coming back. I am able to run. I am healing myself in very real ways because I have inducted laws from these facts. I have put into practice things, and I have had results come from those things. These are the things that I am recording in my book with practical application of how you can replicate those, right? That would be the verification. Now, I cannot verify my own facts. That is not how science works. But I can relay my experience and how I attain the results that I have done, and other people can replicate those, and then we will have the verification of those laws which I have formulated from the results of the actions that I have taken. I am quite literally doing the thing that she is talking about right here, and as far as I know, there is nobody else that has done that in that particular manner, because as far as I know, nobody has verifiable results other than me. And that is not to set me above anyone, as I say all of the time. Anything I can do, you can do better. You can do everything better than me. I believe that. I really do. What I can conceive of is different from what you can conceive of. And if you can conceive of greater than me, then you can do greater than me. I believe that. What experienced observer will maintain that spiritualism presents either one of these three elements? The medium is not uniformly surrounded by such test conditions that we may be sure of the facts. The inductions from the supposed facts are unwarranted in the absence of such verification, and, as a corollary, there has been no sufficient verification of those hypotheses by experience. In short, the prime element of accuracy has, as a rule, been lacking. That we may not be charged with desire to misrepresent the position of spiritualism at the date of this present writing, or accused of withholding credit for advances actually made, we will cite a few passages from the London Spiritualist of March 2, 1877. At a fortnightly meeting held February 19th, a debate occurred upon the subject of ancient thoughts and modern spiritualism. Some of the most intelligent spiritualists of England participated. Among these was Mr. W. Stainton Moses, M.A., who has recently given some attention to the relation between ancient and modern phenomena. He said, "Popular spiritualism is not scientific. It does very little in the way of scientific verification. Moreover, exoteric spiritualism is, to a large extent, devoted to presumed communion with personal friends, or to the gratification of curiosity, or the mere evolution of marvels. The truly esoteric science of spiritualism is very rare, and not more rare than valuable. To it we must look to the origination of knowledge which may be developed exoterically. We proceed too much on the lines of the physicist. Our tests are crude and often illusory. We know too little of the protean power of spirit. Here the ancients were far ahead of us and can teach us much. We have not introduced any certainty into the conditions, a necessary prerequisite for true scientific experiment. There is, largely owing to the fact that our circles are constructed on no principle. We have not even mastered the elementary truths which the ancients knew and acted on, i.e.g. the isolation of mediums. We have been so occupied with wonder hunting that we have hardly tabulated the phenomena, or propounded one theory to account for the production of the simplest of them. We have never faced the question, what is the intelligence? This is the great blot, the most frequent source of error, and here we might learn with advantage from the ancients. There is strongest disinclination among spiritualists to admit the possibility of the truth of occultism. In this respect, they are as hard to convince as is the outer world of spiritualism. Spiritualists start with a fallacy, vis-a-vis that all phenomena are caused by the action of departed human spirits. They have not looked into the powers of the human spirit. They do not know the extent to which spirit acts, how far it reaches, what it underlies. That I agree with. None of what I have done has been through the intervention of a spirit, an angel, a demon, or any other entity. It is through direct communication with God, the Creator, with no mediation in between, through direct revelation of how I should manipulate the energies, and me manipulating the energies, right? No other spirit is responsible for my healing other than me and God. Our position could not be better defined. If spiritualism has a future, it is in the keeping of such men as Mr. Stainton Moses. Our work is done. Would that it were better done, but despite our inexperience in the art of bookmaking, and the serious difficulty of writing in a foreign tongue, we hope we have succeeded in saying some things that will remain in the minds of the thoughtful. The enemies of truth have all been counted, and all passed in review. Modern science, powerless to satisfy the aspirations of the race, makes the future a void, and bereaves man of hope. In one sense it is like the Baital Pachisi, the Hindu vampire of popular fancy, which lives in dead bodies but feeds on the rottenness of matter. The theology of Christendom has been rubbed threadbare by the most serious minds of the day. It is found to be, on the whole, subversive, rather than promotive of spirituality and good morals. Instead of expounding the rules of the divine law and justice, it teaches but itself. In place of an ever-living deity, it preaches the evil one and makes him indistinguishable from God himself. Lead us not into temptation is the aspiration of Christians. Who, then, is the tempter? Satan? No. The prayer is not addressed to him. It is that tutelar genius who hardened the hearts of Pharaoh, put an evil spirit into Saul, sent lying messengers to the prophets, and tempted David to sin. It is the Bible, God of Israel. Our examination of the multitudinous religious faiths that mankind early and late have professed most assuredly indicates that they have all been derived from one primitive source. It would seem as if they were all different modes of expressing the yearning of the imprisoned human soul for intercourse with supernal spheres. As the white ray of light is decomposed by the prism into the various colors of the solar spectrum, so the beam of divine truth, in passing through the three-sided prism of man's nature, has been broken up into vari-colored fragments called religions. And as the days of the spectrum, by imperceptible shadings, merge into each other, so the great theologies that have appeared at different degrees of divergence from the original source have been connected by minor schisms, schools, and offshoots from one side or the other. Combined, their aggregate represents one eternal truth. Separate, they are but shades of human error, and the signs of imperfection. The worship of the Vedic Pitris is fast becoming the worship of the spiritual portion of mankind. It but needs the right perception of things objective to finally discover that the only world of reality is the subjective. What has been contemptuously termed paganism was ancient wisdom replete with deity. And Judaism and its offspring, Christianity and Islamicism, derived whatever of inspiration they contained from this ethnic parent. Pre-Vedic Brahmanism and Buddhism are the double source from which all religions sprung. Nirvana is the ocean to which all tend. For the purposes of a philosophical analysis, we need not take account of the enormities which have blackened the record of many of the world's religions. True faith is the embodiment of divine charity. Those who minister at its altars are but human. As we turn the blood-stained pages of ecclesiastical history, we find that, whoever may have been the hero and whatever costumes the actors may have worn, the plot of the tragedy has ever been the same. But the eternal night was in and behind all, and we pass from what we see to that which is invisible to the eyes of sense. Our fervent wish has been to show true souls how they may lift aside the curtain, and in the brightness of the night made day, look with undazzled gaze upon the unveiled truth. And that is going to bring us to the end of Isis Unveiled. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to some very difficult topics. I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs and that I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something that I apologize for. I am here to sort through the truth. I have experienced something greater. It is not some miraculous flash from the divine that instantaneously healed me. It is through practice and dedication of magical precepts and concepts that I have been able to accomplish the things that I did. It is with the full cooperation of the Creator. I do not deny that in the slightest. Without God, nothing is possible. The Holy Spirit, which is the all-pervading electromagnetic forces of creation, are there for you as much as for all of creation. There are rules. There are laws. There are 8 laws of creation. I have outlined them for a reason. I point them out all of the time for a reason. They are how you align yourself with creation. The fundamental understanding of the law of returns, the law of one, the law of, I have to look at them to call them by name exactly, but there are 8 laws of creation. And those 8 laws govern how magic works. They govern how everything works, every single interaction that you ever have. All of those things are governed. There is a pattern. There is a process by which you can accomplish them. I have healed myself in the name of the Lord God Almighty Himself with no intermediary. There's no Jesus. There's no Muhammad. There's no Allah. It is God who is the creator and sustainer of all things, who has allowed me to take command of the electromagnetic forces of creation, which is the Holy Spirit, and allowed me to heal myself. One day, very soon, I'm going to be able to do this entire type of video in this voice. I'm almost there. I'm not quite there. And a lot of that has to do with me not being confident in this voice tone. Now I bring it up to here, and that is working the bottom end of my range. I can bring it way up here, which is where I started out. You can go back through my videos and you can watch the progress. You can see me more fully commit to this line of reasoning, this dedication of practice that I do. You can watch it happen. You can see it documented. You can see me not be able to talk 1 year ago, and you can see me talk right now. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment. Let me know if you agree or disagree with anything that was said. If it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If you have another work you would like to see me in the same manner we are doing here, drop that in the comments as well. If you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pit Steak. Peace.